We came from every corner of the nation, representing the bravest and the best. Many of us left our homes as boys with high ideals and a yearning for adventure. We faced the reality and brutality of war, but with uncommon bravery, valor, dedication, and sacrifice, we fought in real places, dangerous trenches, and hot jungles against a savage enemy. Some of us sacrificed to save a fellow soldier, some to achieve an objective when the situation became extreme, stepping forward regardless of the cost. Most of us gave of ourselves without knowing where the courage came from. But we all gave something because we understood the preciousness of liberty.
Throughout America's history, there are a countless number of stories, forgotten in time, that we will never know of. Brave accounts of unflinching valor and undaunted courage on the battlefield, such as during the War for Independence, the Barbary Powers War against the Muslim corsairs off the northern coast of Africa, the War of 1812 when Great Britain invaded American soil, the infamous Civil War, as brother faced brother, friend had to fight against friend, the Spanish-American War in 1898, World War I with its grueling trench warfare, World War II in both the European theater against the fascists and Nazis and the Pacific theater against the Japanese, the Korean War when the frozen chosen stood firm against wave after wave of thousands of communist Chinese, the Vietnam War with its fierce guerrilla warfare amidst tunnels and thick jungles. And in our current generation, tens of thousands have given up the comforts of home to fight against godless, barbaric terrorism in Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan.
In every war that America has ever been involved in, when there was a need, there were always those willing to step forward, knowing that what they were doing could actually cost them their lives. But they had a value that they thought was worthwhile. That value was the freedom of our country.
These men should be, they must be given honor and glory for giving that last full measure of devotion for the cause of liberty. But these stories of sacrifice and of service must begin with and be led by the unparalleled testimonies of the brave men who formulated and established this country in a new birth of freedom. Our founding fathers were great men, willing to risk all and to give everything so that America could become a possibility and genuine liberty would have an opportunity to flourish. Many today believe that they were wild-eyed, rabble-rousing ruffians looking for a fight, but that is not necessarily true. They were men, settled in character and principles. Many of them could have lived lives of ease had they been willing to follow the dictatorial whims of the King of Britain. But they refused to be puppets, to be stepped upon, to be drained of their finances through extensive and unlawful taxation without proper representation in the English Parliament. Our founding fathers did everything in their power to avoid facing conflict, but the shedding of blood began in 1775. Though King George III and Parliament were stepping all over their rights as British subjects, the colonists continued to beseech the British government to reconsider. They submitted a document called the Olive Branch Petition, pleading with the British government to cease from regulating taxes and tariffs against the law. In so many words, they were reasoning, please, we don't want to go to war with you, but what you are doing is wrong. Please, allow us to have appropriate representation. By early 1776, Continental Congress received word back from Great Britain that their Olive Branch Petition had been rejected. King George III declared that the colonists were in open and avowed rebellion, and that the British Empire would use their utmost endeavors to withstand and suppress such rebellion, and that blows must decide whether they are to be subject to this country or to be independent. These stately men of character and education now had their backs against the wall with only two options: fight for freedom or submit willingly to slavery. By this time, the Continental Congress stated, "We are reduced to the alternative of choosing an unconditional submission to tyranny or resistance by force. The latter is our choice. We have counted the cost of this contest and find nothing so dreadful as voluntary slavery. Honor, justice, and humanity forbid us tamely to surrender that freedom which we received from our gallant ancestors, and which our innocent posterity have a right to receive from us." And John Adams somberly realized with his fellow patriots, "It is the will of heaven that the two countries should be sundered forever." In full agreement, our founding fathers pressed forward with the formulation of the Declaration of Independence. They recognized that true independence was only achieved by obedience to God through rebellion against unbiblical and unlawful tyranny. They wrote in our Declaration of Independence, "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them." They clearly understood that nature's God, Jehovah himself, had given them this opportunity and right. They continued, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed or freely given by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, certain rights that should not be and cannot be taken away, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Thomas Jefferson stated, "God who gave us life gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God?" Samuel Adams also mentioned that the pursuit of happiness was a gift from God. Our founding fathers knew that God was the originator and creator of all life. The path of happiness, the pursuit of happiness, was found in His Word, and that liberty was a gift from heaven through the presence of His Spirit. They believed that God had given them these rights, and no government had the authority to take them away. In the conclusion of our Declaration of Independence, unwaveringly standing tall together with great courage, they declared, "For the pledge of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Here they were stating, we have a total dependence, a complete resignation, a confident trust in the providential hand of Almighty God. Our founding fathers knew that in order to win the fight against Great Britain, they would need to have a firm reliance upon God for His daily guidance, provision, and protection. They realized what it would mean to sign their names to this document. They understood the price they would have to pay, how that each of them would become the most wanted men in the world by the British Crown. And many of them did suffer for their stand, some having to give their all, that last full measure of devotion. 5 of the signers were captured by the British as traitors and tortured before they died. 12 of them had their homes ransacked and burned. 2 lost their sons while they were fighting in the Continental Army, and another had 2 sons captured. 9 others fought and died from wounds or hardships they experienced as they gave their all in the fight for freedom. Specifically, Carter Baxton of Virginia, a wealthy planter and trader, stood upon the shore and helplessly watched as his own ships were decimated and destroyed by the British Navy. He sold his home and all his properties to pay off his debts and died in poverty. Thomas McKean served in the Continental Congress voluntarily without pay, even after all his possessions were taken from him by the British. He once wrote to John Adams that he was being hunted like a fox and was compelled to relocate his family more than 5 times in just a few months to keep them safe and in hiding. Francis Lewis and his family fled for their lives as the British came and destroyed their home. However, his wife was captured and thrown into jail. Lewis was unable to successfully locate her and rescue her in time before she died just a few months later. John Hart lost everything. His fields and gristmill had already been laid to waste by previous British raids. As they heard the British coming yet again, he sent out all 13 of his children to run for their lives in the woods before it was too late. His wife begged him to not stay with her and drove him from her bedside as she lay dying with sickness. For more than a year, he lived in the forests and caves, on the run, evading capture. After the War for Independence, he returned to the ruins of his house to find that his wife had died and his children were gone, never to be found again. Nevertheless, the price of freedom to our founding fathers was priceless. On April 26, 1777, in the midst of these turmoils, John Adams wrote, "Posterity, you will never know how much it cost the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make a good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that I ever took half the pains to preserve it." In 1781, as a young colonial patriot was on his way to be hung by British troops for being a spy for the Continental Army, he mused this: "I should have liked to live for my country, but if I have to die, I'll do it as a man and a Christian ought. I hope those who will be born 100 years after I'm gone will appreciate the price we had to pay to give them a home and a country. These men sweat, bled, and died to preserve what we have today. They understood the value and the importance, yea, the sweetness of liberty."
George Washington, when I read what he did, and it makes me wonder why he committed his life as he did, with all of the hardship that he and his troops, what was his insight in his mind of what did he really want to achieve by putting himself through the torture that he really did? And yet, there was something driving him that said, this is the greatest place, this is the greatest opportunity, and this can be the greatest country in history.
Standing upon the barricaded streets of New York City, surrounded by the largest invasion force the British Empire had ever launched, General George Washington challenged his troops. The fate of the unborn millions will now depend, under God, on the courage and conduct of this army. Let us therefore rely upon the goodness of the cause and the aid of the Supreme Being, in whose hands victory is, to animate and encourage us to great and noble actions.
They relied on that strength and wisdom that they received from God in order to make this country what it really turned out to be.
May we not take for granted what these men did for us through the providential hand of God, so that we might enjoy our liberty today. And God forbid that we become careless with what has been so wonderfully entrusted to us.
We can't afford to lose that. We have got somehow to reinstill into our communities and to our youth that what they have sacrificed, what they have done for the country, ought to be recognized and honored.
Freedom is not and never will be free. It must always be paid by the high price of sacrifice in order for it to be sustained. Throughout the generations of America's past, countless have stood to preserve all that we hold dear. Each of these who gave this last full measure of devotion are heroes who deserve our utmost respect and gratitude. Their heroism demands that we more than just remember, but rather live our lives in the freedom that they have provided for us in such a way that honors their sacrifice. So many of us Americans will never really comprehend what the true meaning of liberty is, because we will never have an opportunity to fight on the battlefield with our lives on the line. We've enjoyed so much freedom for so long that we are perhaps in danger of forgetting how much blood it cost to provide what we cherish. May these sacrifices that were made be not made in vain. President Lincoln said it best as he closed his Gettysburg Address, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. May we always remember and always be proud. Let us arise in thankfulness and celebration to give honored glory unto all who gave this last full measure of devotion.